let's buy peace at the price of war.
It's a complicated and sometimes a highly misunderstood global issue.
It's not a regional issue. It's not a national issue. It's a global issue.
The narrative of labeling the Arab states in a negative light cannot hold water.
I'm in Turkey attending a media conference focusing on the future of Palestine in the global media. But why Palestine? To understand why Palestine is the subject of discussion, let's first look at what is happening in Palestine. Israeli and Arab Palestinians have been fighting for decades, and the root cause of this fight has everything to do with history. Tracing the genesis of this conflict, you may have to go back to the times of Adolf Hitler that saw 6 million Jewish people killed. After this, the Jewish people wanted their own country. And as history would read, the Jewish people settled in Palestine, which they considered their traditional homeland, but the Arabs who already lived there felt that was unfair.
The Palestinians consider the Jews who came here as immigrants, as people who took their land and took their property, and they are trying to push them out from here.
For that reason, the Arabs were not going down without a fight. Israel and the surrounding Arab nations fought several wars over the territory. In 1948, the State of Israel was created. In 1967, another war left Israel in control of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, two territories home to large Palestinian population. And for the Jewish people, there could have been other reasons why they were determined to fight. And
it goes back to Abraham, and that when God promised the land to Abraham. And so the Jews have this belief that this land belongs to the Jews because God promised this land to Abraham.
For the children of Israel, they will refer to Abraham. They will refer to their story, how they walked with God during that period of time. And that is what they have remained even up to this place that we find in Jerusalem, which is their center of worship. They have remained very orthodox, and they keep to the Judaistic way of religion. Matters of spiritual faith are very deep and they're very emotive. And so what I have believed, what I have known to be the truth, you cannot get me out of very easily.
Francis Ameyibo is the head of Ghana News Agency and was one of the key speakers during Palestine International Media Forum held in Turkey. He explains how the biblical perspective of the conflict has determined the Palestine narrative.
The biblical narration, those of us from the Christian community outside the zone, we only know of the Palestinian-Israeli struggle through the Bible. And that is very strong within the Christian community. We see it as the Palestinian people struggling to take away the God-given land to the Israelis. That is how we see it. But we are now beginning to see different angle. So the question that we ask over and again is that, what is the struggle about? Is it still the biblical struggle, or the dynamics have changed? If the dynamics have changed, what are the parameters now? What is the struggle all about? Is it still struggle for land, struggle for independence, struggle for economic power, struggle for identity, and what actually are they fighting for? So this is where we are coming from. Those of us from the Christian community, we want to understand the Palestinians. We want to understand what the struggle is all about.
So what is the struggle all about?
Well, the problem is that since 1967, the most ardent supporter of the Zionist project of Israel has been the United States. And the saddest thing of this is that this support of Israel has unfortunately come at the expense of the Palestinians. Remember, the Palestinians were there when the State of Israel was created in 1948. They are still there today, and they are definitely not going anywhere. And this is the critical point, that countries that claim to show the interests of that region need to be fair They need to operate on a level playing field so that all peoples of the Middle East are given a fair go in terms of human rights, in terms of political representation, and in terms of land ownership.
Having listened to experts in Turkey and having visited Israel and Palestine territories in West Bank, I cannot but conclude that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is over who gets what land and how it's controlled. Shatha Atta is in the hospitality industry in West Bank. She tells me how the conflict has affected Palestinians' cost of living.
I'm living in Palestinian territory, and it's not a country with a dependent country. We are our economic depend on Israel. So Israeli people take high salaries comparing to our salaries. And we are depending, for example, for the gasoline things, we depend on Israel. So they make those things high, which is good with them. However, for us, it's not good.
For people like Shatha, they have to live in the confinement of this wall which separates Palestine territories from Israel. To Israelis, this could just be a boundary, but to persons like Shatha Atta, perhaps this is a wall of the largest open-air prison in the world.
Sometimes when there's some conflict, the propaganda make it very big on the news. That's why people are afraid to come. So this is what happened.
In Gaza Strip, life for about 1.5 million Palestinians living there is difficult. There have been agreements of ceasefire between Hamas and the Israeli soldiers, but a long-term solution is yet to be found. Jerusalem is at the center of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and so you cannot talk about the Palestine narrative without highlighting why the holy city is claimed by both the Israeli Jews and Arab Palestinians.
We as Muslims, we believe that Jerusalem belongs to the Muslims because of the history, because it was established by Prophet Abraham and his son Ismail. Different phases of history made it in such a way that now it belongs to other people. History says in 1877, in fact, there were less than 1% Jews in Israel. And then in different phases, the Palestinians found themselves without any land, and their own land was given to other people.
Whenever one brings their narrative, they have to support it by their background. This split that came out of the Ishmaelites also bore the Arabs, who then also came with their other religion, which is called Islam. And so you have Judaism here, you have also Islam here. Out of Ishmael and out of Isaac, you have two religions. And when you look at these two people, even in terms of their faith, that's why both of them have a stake in Jerusalem, because all of them tend to target the origin of their religion from Abraham.
And that's how close Jerusalem is to both Jews and Arabs.
Thank you, Mr.
However, the Israeli Authority is particular on Jerusalem as the capital city of the State of Israel. This is despite United Nations General Assembly resolution declaring the status of Jerusalem as Israel's capital as null and void in December 2017.
Jerusalem is the capital of the people of Israel since King David and King Solomon, exactly 3,000 years ago. We don't need any confirmation of nobody, of the UN, of state here, state there. Luckily, America recognized Jerusalem as the official capital of the State of Israel. And for us, it's very important because America is our best friend. But definitely there is no question. Everything that relates to us is in Jerusalem, not from the historical point of view only. You take our parliament, you take our president, state house, you take our government, you take our government ministries, everything is there. Any guests that come to visit Israel goes to Jerusalem. All his meetings are in Jerusalem. So what should we do next in order to convince any state on earth that Jerusalem is our capital? We don't need it.
Adopted.
In December 2017, Kenya was one of the 21 nations that were not present for the vote of a resolution that called upon all states to refrain from the establishment of diplomatic missions in the holy city of Jerusalem. Dan Odaba is an international relations expert. He puts Kenya's absence during the voting into perspective.
First of all, you should understand that there are various factors that determine a country's foreign policy. We call them foreign policy determinants. Now, the issue of Kenya sitting on the fence, as you put it, especially when it comes to the vote on the issue of Jerusalem, this is not the first time in the UN General Assembly for countries to abstain on voting. Countries abstain from voting for various reasons. Main reason being that they do not want to interfere with bilateral relations or their key allies or their objectives or interests. So Kenya is not the first country to abstain from any vote because it's normally a strategic decision that is based on interests of the key allies, in this case, Israel. For your information, Israel was the first country to have diplomatic relations in Kenya 2 days before it got independence. That was on 10th of December in 1963. Israel also is the first country to build an embassy in this country. There's a lot of bilateral relations. Kenya has signed several agreements, memorandum of understanding with Israel. There's the equivalent of USAID of Israel called Mashav. Even though Israel is not a donor country, but Mashav has helped Kenya in so many ways. So for Kenya to abstain from such a vote is not something strange to me because it's a tactical move with interest not to severe relationship between Kenya and Israel or Kenya's objectives or other interests.
Odaba says it's all about interests, making it a case of looking at the side of the bread that is well buttered at the most convenient time.
For your information, in 2013, during the Africa Arab Summit, President Uhuru Kenyatta met President Mahmoud Abbas, and he told him that his request to restart the diplomatic relations with Kenya was being considered. Remember, Palestine had a diplomat in Nairobi many years ago. This is not the first time Kenya is showing interest in terms of supporting the sovereignty of Palestine state.
Talking of supporting sovereignty of state of Palestine, there are those who feel that it's the high time that Kenyans are told about the real issues of the conflict, and yes, they are already doing it.
Kenya Palestine Solidarity Movement is, I think, the only Palestinian Solidarity Committee within Kenya, and so it was created to bring people, pro-Palestinian people together, as well as create awareness about what's happening in Palestine amongst Kenyans. Because a lot of people through church or through school education system are not very, do not really get the right information. I think information here is people are misinformed about what's actually happening.
I think it's one of the last points in Earth where we are still having active occupation, where almost everyone is aware of it and everyone is almost silent about it. And I think it's interesting and important to raise awareness about it.
One of our big achievements has been that we are increasingly shifting the lens away from considering Palestine as a religious, the Israeli-Palestine conflict as a religious conflict, as a religious narrative, to a narrative that's essentially about justice.
The Palestine narrative, one of those stories that are very sensitive for any journalist to execute, with every story done receiving praise and criticism in equal measure. Many are times when media has been blamed for being part of the conflict. Perhaps the reason why the organizers of the third edition of Palestine International Forum for Media and Communications saw it wise to highlight the place of media in ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
You cannot be impartial when you see injustice. You have to stand up for justice. You cannot be impartial when one people are oppressed, you see, and deprived and disenfranchised. You have to stand up for the victim. You know, there's no way you can sit on the fence when you see something wrong. It's a myth that has been generated by the Western media, the corporate media, that somehow they are impartial, they are balanced in their approach, and it is not true.
The media conference held in Turkey brought together hundreds of journalists, academics, and writers from around 60 countries around the world to discuss the future of Palestine in the global media.
I urge all my colleagues, stick to the truth, just tell the truth. We do not have any time to waste. There are blood spreadings every day. The Palestinian people suffer every day, and we cannot afford to wait until whenever to tell the truth. Start now by telling the truth, address the Palestinian issue to your audience, and serve the Palestinian struggle for liberation. This is our duty as journalists, and start with it right now. Don't wait until tomorrow.
The world remains divided on this issue.
Concerted efforts should be made by all actors led by the United Nations, the Arab League, the African Union, and all actors involved into this peace process to make sure that initiatives are put in place to have a sustainable peace. And especially now that Palestine claims Jerusalem to be part of their capital city, Israel has already made Jerusalem their capital city, all these issues can be resolved.
There have been proposals set forward. You know, there's a two-state solution where, you know, Israel and Palestine live, you know, side by side in security and peace. There has been the one-state solution, or what is known as the binational solution. And then also, you know, there are fringe solutions where people say that, oh, you know, the West Bank should be taken over by Jordan, and, you know, Gaza should be taken over by the by Egypt. But I would say that I think that there is an opportunity for Israeli citizens and Palestinian citizens to sit side by side and come up with a solution that fits them all.
We as Christians need to come in as mediators, need to come in to arbitrate into the many things that probably are misunderstood or have been misconstrued because of culture that has gone over many years. You see, things that have happened over the years, you cannot just change them overnight.